we're realizing we were never meant to live like this. On the clock, on a schedule. Our mindset is shifting. Our intuition is being activated. And just breathe. We're opening up to other ways. We are going within for our answers of rest and peace. We are finding joy. So open up and let's revolutionize your mindset.
Welcome to Intuitive Shift Podcast, where we sit down with people who have trusted their intuition and shifted their mindset and chosen an empowered path, an intuitive path, all towards self-discovery and soul growth. And today we sit down with Keith D'Amelio. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. So I was introduced to you because, guys, let's face it, this is how the world works. I was introduced to you through a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, and this is all how networking happens. But I really loved your background. And so you used to work for a major company. You can mention it if you want to, but you were in charge of performance for top athletes. And were these athletes all around the world or just here in North America?
All over the world. So as mentioned there, I was head of athlete performance for Nike for 13 years. Again, I've worked in or around professional sports for 25 years, right? I was in the NBA for 10 years, was at Stanford University for 2 years with men's basketball, and then came up here to Portland, Oregon, to head up that, which was a new position for Nike back 13 years ago. They still, when I left, didn't really know exactly what that position was in a large company that sells shirts and shoes. But yeah, my role basically helped athletes all over the globe, all different sports, male, female, didn't matter. If Nike sponsored you as an athlete or a team, a federation, some way like that, how could myself and my team help you perform your best? That was our goal, regardless of product, right? Product things may stem out of it and may come just from simple awareness of problems that athletes are having. But my remit was helping athletes perform at their best on a day-to-day standpoint.
How much do you think mindset is involved in that?
I mean, it might underpin all of it. I mean, there's, I was having a conversation recently with somebody and they were asking me the difference because, again, like I said, 25 years, I've worked with the gamut of professional athletes, from the absolute icons and best of all times to your very, very good. But what separates that? Because at some point in that sort of pyramid of talent, let's call it, they're all very good. They're all physically, right? Like, everyone is strong. Everyone is fast. Everyone at that level. Yes, okay, someone might be a little bit faster than others, but the physical abilities aren't really the major differentiators. Mm-hmm. What often separates them and separates the absolute elite from the very, very good is the mindset. And in the mindset in which they approach not just competition and maybe they're able to sort of unlock something different, but the mindset of their day-to-day approach in everything is what, in my opinion, separates that level of practitioner of just anything, right? Anyone operating at an extremely high level like that, I think mindset is what underpins that difference between other people who are just very, very good.
Do you think have you found that the importance and emphasis on routine, having a daily routine in your life absolutely shows the outcome?
I think it helps for sure. I think some people maybe can get away with it, but if you really look at again, people who are operating at a high level consistently, it probably is that routine that helps. I can speak for my own, experience. When I am in my, when I have my routine dialed and I'm very consistent with it, I am typically functioning at a higher level in all aspects of what it is I'm trying. When I Yeah, I'm in the middle of a move right now. We discussed, right? So I am not in my normal routine. And it absolutely affects the, my ability to at least in my opinion, perform as well as I can in whatever it is I'm trying to perform in.
Yeah. I get frustrated. I'll have this great routine and I'll be totally dialed into it. And then I swear I just the smallest little thing will throw that off. And oftentimes even just a short travel, just like a 3-day, 4-day travel. It is so hard to get back into the routine. And even though in my mind, even my body lets me know you are doing so much better into this routine. And that is probably one of the hardest thing. I was actually in a meeting last evening with a round table and we were discussing we were talking about soul health, just in regards to how do we protect our energy field? How do we protect, because a lot of people on the call have been dealing with some illnesses lately. And so we were talking about soul health and the importance of having in that daily practice, that daily routine. And even, let's not even sports, not even, spiritual health, even when you look at business, there are so many very successful entrepreneurs around the world. And when they're asked, they always say, it was my morning routine. It's making that choice to get out of the bed at a certain time. And I don't like the word pushing, but they do. They push themselves to do it. And I would love to know from your experience, what have you found to be some of the key factors that might hinder someone from committing to a routine? Like at what point do we start getting into our head and then we just go and we just bypass that routine?
Yeah, you bring up a great point there with again, sort of whether it's entrepreneurs or again anyone operating at a high level and what that routine is, whether it's their morning routine or some functional routine. I think sometimes morning routines and like, ooh, this is what this person does, and I'll just copy that. Well, it's not going to work the same, right? There might be aspects of it that you can take, but to your question there, I think one of the biggest limiting factors is their self-limiting beliefs. So I think some people they're just afraid to kind of push themselves to, I can't do that. Well, yes, you can. They almost, they allow themselves to be limited with some of those beliefs. But then also people's willingness to just be uncomfortable and do hard things. No one really wants to get up at 4:30 in the morning and go work out or go whatever it is, right? But they force themselves to do it, to your point. They're forcing themselves to do things that that they don't want to do potentially, right? They're fighting their human instincts to just stay comfortable under the covers and go back to bed. A very good friend of mine told me a story a while ago. And again, we could take this conversation so many different directions, but he said one of the things that his grandmother used to make them do and sort of preach to the entire family is every day you have to do one thing that you hate doing. And it's just like the lesson that teaches you, in my opinion, right? To just like, no, you're not always going to like what you do, but you just have to do it. And I think, human nature, it's why we're in the we have some of the health issues that we have sort of, globally and certainly here within North America and in the United States is people know exercise is good for you. People know that like eating healthy is good for you. They just don't want to do it. Right. So it's just easier to not do it. So they just, forget it. And then we have the health concern. So I think, again, getting into those routines, it's fighting the self-limiting beliefs and then just fighting human nature to do hard things.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'll give you an instance of a hard thing that I did. So it's a hard thing for me to do is to go to the grocery store. It literally,
I love going to the grocery store, by the way.
you're just like my husband. He literally told me that last night because he was like, Abby, you're ridiculous. I love going to the grocery store. So, but I have been dealing with this head cold for the longest time, and my body has been showing like, you need these herbs, you need this. And so I have my little coffee cup here. I went to the grocery store and I got all my pure bone broth and all my herbs and my celery and onions and carrots. And I came home and I boiled that and I've been drinking it nonstop. This morning I woke up. So I did this yesterday. This morning I woke up. My head is clear. I feel amazing. And you know how long it took me to finally go to the grocery store and listen to what my body told me to do? Like it took me 2 weeks. It took me
Longer than it should have. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, and it is. It is the it's so funny that you said it because my guides say this to me all the time. Do the hard thing. Do the hard thing because it's always so much simpler than what we've built up in our head. And it's the learning to be like comfortable in the uncomfortable. And
Yep.
that's the greatest way to face our fears because every time I've ever done that, I've always surprised myself. Um, I've learned something. I have grown exponentially whenever I have just said, forget it, do it. You know what I mean? Like I didn't say forget it. I said the other F word, but I'm like, just do it.
Yeah.
And you're always surprised yourself.
Yeah. And again, I think in if we go into maybe some other sort of routines, whether it's working out or things like that, like again, back to the kind of self-limiting beliefs. I think people, they're scared. Running is a great example.
Yeah.
A lot of people do it, but if you ask a lot of people if they're a runner, they'll say, no, I'm not a runner. But in just it's that mentality, especially somebody who's trying to start a habit like that, to create a routine, to be healthier and be more active and go run every day. Again, they're not going to go break a marathon world record, but that's not their goal. Their goal is to just be healthier. But getting them to switch the mindset of, oh, I'm a runner. I'm like, and then if these things become part of their identity, well, then they're much more likely to stick and to become, kind of a really an ingrained routine for them moving forward, where then it's something that it's not even a conscious thought anymore. They're just doing it.
Well, that's right along the lines of daily mantras.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, the more that you verbally hear yourself say something that is truth, whether it is actually in that moment or something in the future that you're wanting to call into this moment, it really doesn't matter.
Yep.
Even if the words that you're saying, you're like, I am a runner. If your goal is you've always wanted to do the marathon and you've never ran more than 100 yards, if you just tell yourself every morning, I am a runner, I am a runner, and you go out and you do 3 minutes, you do 4 minutes, but
Yep.
it will become a reality and your whole body will become a runner.
Yep.
And
It
you'll,
just changes the complete mindset there. I get back to mindset. One area for me that has always been sort of a grounding routine, I would call it, but part of things. But I have fallen off of it significantly in the last year, which frustrates me every morning too when I recognize it. But then I've yet to change it, so that's a whole nother story. But I mean, since the time I was probably in high school, I have always because I've always been fascinated with like, continued like development, like personal development and, business and all these things. Right. So I've always sort of, gravitated towards, learning in those different areas, but goal setting as one of them. Right. And I've got probably here's notebooks full of just every day. What I've done for, again, the majority of my life is like 10 goals. I write them in like the affirmative of, it's already happened and I put time out, all this stuff. Right. And, and I can go back and it's always been part of my routine, my morning routine. It's the first thing I do. And I can go back and look at, again, like I said, I have notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks of just, that's the only thing in them is every single day. And also then the amount of goals that were on that list that I accomplished and just how kind of rewarding that is, but that was such a staple of my entire life. And now I'm trying to get myself back into that because it's always been something that I've it has really sort of grounded me and helped every morning. But to think about some things and so it does frustrate me that I've fallen off my routine in that setting, but I will get back.
I mean, right next to this is my to-do list. I bought 6 of these because why buy one? I just bought a whole entire mass packet of it.
Yep.
And every day, I try to every day. Some of this has turned into my meeting notes. But I write down, and there is nothing more satisfying than like, I
For
mean,
sure.
it's just because what you're doing is when you're like scratching that off or like checking that off, your brain is then able to just remove it. and it's not this running like tick, 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 tick of all these things to do. I was feeling when I was in college, there was just like so many different routines. And it actually was putting me into a little bit of a depression because I was overwhelmed a lot and a lot of anxiety. So
Sure.
I went to a therapist and I did like 5 or 6 sessions with her. And it was all focused on just mindset. And she said, Abby, for your mind, you need to, when you're feeling overwhelmed, you need to write things
Yep.
down because it slows it down. I mean, I think, right. I mean, we're seeing record high ADHD, ADD, like, in everybody because we're so being stimulated all the time, everywhere.
Nonstop. Yep.
So how much of that would you use with your athletes and in your own business?
In terms of like,
Helping them dial it in terms of
yeah.
like writing things down. And here's the thing too, I want to ask this question as well,
Yep.
because I think some people think that the only thing that needs to go on here is like the big things, right? Like write a book, or see, I want to write a book,
Yeah, sure.
like write a book, like go to Europe, like the big things. Sometimes it's just do the dishes, like
Yeah.
switch my
There's,
laundry.
those almost are two separate worlds in my mind. But yeah, for sure. But you have to, right, to keep yourself, um, again, to fight the human nature that is like, I'll do it later. And then actually just pushing it down the road is only going to create more anxiety potentially for some, and just creates more, mental chaos, so to speak. But that level of just kind of getting thoughts out, like I utilize a lot with my athletes. Now, some athletes are better at it than others in terms of being able to articulate, to just get into that mindset, and think about things that they want to accomplish. But I know one of the one athlete who I've worked with his entire career, again, future Hall of Famer. He, early on in his career, now he's a different sort of athlete. Like there's very few that actually no one I've ever worked with who is as disciplined as he is in all walks of life, not just, his on-field performance in what it takes there. In every area of his life, he is as disciplined as it comes. But we sat down early on and he just listed out the goals for his career.
Mm-hmm.
Wanted to do this, I want to accomplish this, I want to accomplish this. And okay, great. Now we can have a plan. That was the larger one. Sort of, what does my career look like? And then every year we'd sit down and we'd do okay, this season, what do we want this season? If those are our overarching goals in focus, how do we then break that down into each season? Make sure we're tracking on that. Now in team sports, he only has so much control over some of those outcomes because there's, you be NFL player, there's 21 other people on the football field with him. So there's a lot of other things that are outside of his control. But okay, what can we control? We can control how we prepare for these things. What does that look like? Okay, and having a detailed plan there. Some athletes, I just think, just like some people, it's for whatever the reason is, and everyone has a different one. I think doing that is almost overwhelming for them, right? Because some people think that, if I put it down like on paper like that, like, ooh, what, like it's again that sort of like, insecurity like creeps up of like, well, what if I can't accomplish it? I wrote it down now, and now I'm gonna, like, it's okay, like, but you have to, I think surprise yourself with putting things down that eventually you accomplish if you put a plan to them.
I think some people are actually afraid to dream that big.
Without question. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if they write it down, oh goodness, I've just set myself up for failure.
Yep.
Um,
Even professional athletes, not just again, I think some professional athletes, they're afraid to dream, but they're afraid to say like, oh, I want to be a Hall of Fame athlete. Well, why are you afraid to say that? Like, like that whether they don't believe that they have the ability to, okay, well, then they don't want to be, upset when they don't get it, or maybe some people think that who am I to think, I can accomplish that or that, like, again, those sort of self-limiting beliefs, which for me is very frustrating, because, I hate when people like box themselves in, to what's possible.
I think a lot of this self-limiting, I'm hearing like ancestors, right? So I think so much, even in some families, in some
Mhm.
of our family lines, is like, oh, what makes you think you're so special?
Yeah, for sure.
Someone from our family can't accomplish that. And we can have family lines that can self-limit us. And, and sometimes those black sheeps of the family are the ones who didn't listen to any of that and they broke from that.
Yep. No, I've seen that, many times. So that's a great point. I think it's not just what we can limit ourselves, which maybe is part of some of that story, right? But it's also, yeah, like who are you surrounding yourself with to kind of help you reach your goals, or just not limit yourself from reaching your goals.
Yeah. You brought up a word earlier, and it's a great point because I want to delve into this one a little bit differently. Along, just my own intuitive growth, my soul journey. One thing that I have learned the most, and I work with my clients the most, is letting go of that sense of control. When we try to step in and control everything, then you essentially, in a way, you almost lose the magic of stepping back and allowing things to flow and seeing where they go. I don't mean to rhyme so much, but it's so when we can release and surrender our sense of control, that can really help us. Was that something that you had to work with a lot? Because a lot of like high performers, like, no, I control everything, and having to break that down.
Yes, I actually really struggled with that early in my career. In two different ways, I was helped along that journey of my own development with that. So when I first took over, so when I was hired as the head strength and conditioning coach for the Toronto Raptors, I was the youngest head strength coach in the history of the NBA. I was 26 years old. And maybe technically I was sound for the job, but sort of, personally and like, again, from a maturity standpoint, maybe not so much. Right. But I was fortunate enough that year in Toronto, we had a super veteran team. And I at least had the self-awareness to know I cannot come in and just control these NBA vets and tell them it's my way or the highway, who've been playing in the NBA for a decade plus. That is not going to work. So at least I recognize that. But it also gave me the freedom to kind of let go and let that just take shape, and just let some of those athletes know, hey, I'm here for you, man. Like whatever you need, I'll help. But you've been doing this. You have an idea of what you need. Just tell me how I can help, with. And then with some of the athletes who were younger, I was able to build out how I envisioned that program coming to life. And then you had vets that would see that and be like, oh, I hadn't seen that before. And it's like, talk to me, and just sort of this natural evolution of how it came. But I was really fortunate because I think if I'd come in a different team and I didn't have as many veterans, I might have tried to just, force my, approach on everyone. And I don't know if I would have been successful. Right. Or I certainly would have had some bumps along the way. There's no question about that. So that was one way where I think I was able to just kind of like let go a little bit, and let it go. The other way I didn't, unfortunately. That one I learned early. The other one I didn't learn till late. And I look at kind of that journey, especially in pro sports, but there's aspects of this in life too, in everyday life. Of there's certain people you just kind of, it's easy of how you interact with them. And then there's a group of people that's not so easy. And for me, it's always with athletes. I just get it with them. And we just, I can count on one hand the amount of athletes that I've really struggled to connect with, to kind of, get something out of and develop a relationship. I mean, there's athletes I talk to. I was just talking with one this morning. I haven't seen him in 10 years, but we still talk, pretty regularly because we just created this relationship. And so working with athletes, and a lot of people will complain, oh, professional athletes are so difficult to deal with. I've never had that experience. One, I think they recognize that I care about them as a person, so it helps. But the group that I struggled with were coaches and our management teams. And the reason, I don't want to say the reason why, but I took the mindset of like, why are you asking me these questions? Like, just let me do my job. I don't bother you with your job, and let's just and I never, and that was obviously, I was pretty hard-headed, a little bit younger, right? And there was a maturity process that needed to happen. But it wasn't until I left team sport, like on a day-to-day basis, and actually, started at Nike, where I was just exposed to a lot of different sports, and I wasn't in that sort of direct team environment. So I could kind of have a conversation with a coach. I could just look at it without the pressure of tomorrow's game. I got to get this done. And it allowed me to look at things from their perspective, not just my perspective. And I think that's what I did the majority of my career in team sports is I only looked at things through my lens. Maybe I would look at it through the athlete's lens because I had that relationship with them, but almost never did I think about it from a coach's perspective or certainly management perspective. Yeah. And I think that created, probably a lot of unnecessary, arguments and battles that didn't need to happen. And because I was trying to control everything and I was trying to just do it my way without sort of taking a step back and be like, oh, well, I understand what they're asking. Maybe I need to change how I'm communicating with them, or I need to, just take that in consideration with what it is we're trying to do and not be so controlling over what it is we're doing. And I think also some of that comes with just maturity and realizing too, at least if we're talking about some of the areas of professional sports, like there is no one way to do things. Like there isn't, right? That you can accomplish a lot in a lot of different ways. And so kind of realizing that as I just developed as not only a practitioner in that space, but just as a person, that also helps. But yeah.
What did that journey look like for you? What was the moment when you knew that revelation came down of this isn't working for me trying to control of this? What did that mind shift look like for you?
I don't remember one sort of like, just like, aha moment, but it was in a conversation that I was having with one that I can distinctly remember. I was having a conversation with a head coach in the NBA, and I was with the staff. And now, mind you, I'm coming in as a consultant, like not as someone who's there day to day. And the staff members, team sport is full on. It is, especially now, it is 24 hours, 365 days a year. Like you are with them more than you are with your family. That's just what it is. So I'm with the staff and we're having a lunch and we're just talking about things. And I just started asking this head coach questions. Like, well, what are your thoughts about this? And well, okay, I like that, but explain this a little bit more. And like really trying to draw out of this coach information that at least the reason why I was doing it is so, okay, hey, how can we better communicate with him? If I understand what he's thinking, then we can maybe figure out how we can articulate to meet that need but yet still accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. But we just need to understand what he values and how is he thinking about things. And I'm drawing this out, and I'm, it was an awesome conversation. And walked away, and the staff said, that was unbelievable. Like, we've never gotten to ask him those questions and gotten to do that and got that. That was unbelievable. And I was like, but you're with him every single day. Why can't you just have a conversation with them and communicate effectively? And that really was one that I took a step back and I'm like, well, like there's something to that. Like there's something that, and again, I hadn't really, I said, again, I'm saying I was so surprised that like, why haven't you? But I was the same when I was in the team sport. When I was in team sport, very rarely did you get those opportunities. And when you did, sometimes you were scared to ask the head coach questions because if he gets mad, like what, like, or whatever the case may be. So there's all these like under, sort of background circumstances that sometimes prevent just these, amazing conversations from happening in those worlds again, and in life, right?
Mhm.
Like just having an open communication and conversation with somebody. But that one in particular is one that always stands out for me, where I walked away from it and just getting that coach's perspective on things and how much that was able to affect what we did as a staff and again as a consultant, what I helped that staff kind of build out from there was massive.
We talk about leading and living an intuitive life, and really that's being able to connect with the people around you, and sprinkled throughout your conversation with your experiences, you have been mentioning all the different ways where you have shifted and you've learned how to view, experience, and gain knowledge through someone else's eyes, through their experiences, because really at the most basic human level, everyone just wants to be seen and heard. It's as simple as that.
Yep.
And it's when we bring in like ego and control and all those kind of things, when we have those filters, we can't see people clearly. And so you have intuitively learned that, and that's what's has brought success for you. How do you, because so we've been talking about intuition a lot, and so now I want to shift, and I want to
Okay.
talk about shifts. So I would love to know how have you taken some of these, and yourself as well, but some of these athletes that, I know you've seen this, where an athlete has had a very severe injury and perhaps then has to be told you're probably not going to be able to compete at the level that you've been competing at, and or never again. How do you take that shift in their life so that they view it from a different lens? What has that looked like for you, helping these others? And then I want to talk about you yourself. How have you shifted?
Yeah, that's a tough one with athletes because, and I have had that happen a few times.
Yeah.
The interesting thing with athletes, though, especially ones who have attained the level of playing at the professional ranks, which is no easy task, through commitment, through sometimes luck, right? Like there's like just the percentage of people who play and reach that level, it's very, very few. But it's often so tied up into their identity that when that gets taken away, it can be, for some of them, really, really difficult to deal with. And that's, I think, the biggest part with getting someone to shift like in a positive manner, and look at that as an opportunity now to do this. Again, one athlete in particular, we looked at it as just that, an opportunity to, what else is there in life that you want to accomplish? And how can we now go put the same level of commitment, dedication, and effort into achieving that at a high level than you did on the basketball court. Again, not easy to do, and it takes someone with a strong mindset to channel some of that energy and focus into doing that. But it is a different conversation, I think, sometimes, also depending on the sport, because some sports, I think, have they lend themselves to be more physically demanding, which is so your risk of it coming to an end like that is strong, right? And even again, the NFL, the risk of it coming to an end is highly, probable, because the shelf life of an NFL player is 3 years on average. So how can you go into a situation like that which is the interesting one, especially now with collegiate football play. Again, if I stick on football, of thinking about it more as a business, and what else is there? How can this, which is what I often talk to athletes about, is you are given this as a platform, right? Playing on TV, playing in the, and everything that brings. How can you use that, not in a bad way, but how can you use that to leverage other opportunities? So when that gets taken away, it's not the only, like, you've used that for what it is, and what it can give you and provide for other things. And again, I think just like some people are afraid to dream big, like you said, some athletes are too, right? But I just play football. No, you can do far more than just play football.
Yeah.
And getting them to think about that.
It's breaking down, well, what qualities of your personality made you great at football? Or, okay, so all of those qualities didn't go away just because we removed football or golf from this. We still have all of these same qualities. Okay, what else can we slide into that slot that's been removed? And that's how we shift. For some reason in my life, I've always landed my home in areas where I've been surrounded with a lot of ex-pro athletes, and mainly, my husband knows them, but the ones that I have met have been able to shift beautifully into a new life, and they're utilizing that same level of routine and passion and effort and dedication, their team player mentality
Mhm.
into other factors of their life. So kind of jumping, but within the same, what is the best advice that you could give? Because I see this in children and in these teens, and their whole identity, from a lot of parents driven this, their whole identity is this sport.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times the ultimate goal is the scholarship, right? Um, Having seen the other side of it, right? Like, you have seen where all of those years of youth end up. What would be your advice to those students and to those parents out there that are creating this identity for their children around a sport?
Yeah. For the parents, again, because I have two boys, right? I have a 14 and an 11-year-old, and I coach them in sports, or certainly have. We just lost our playoff game on Saturday in football, so our season is over. But the perspective, at least that I can, and again, I'm careful with how I talk about it, but again, when I see these parents try and force it on their kids to, no, you're going to play football, they don't really want to play football, because I've seen that actually come out the other end, and I've seen people play at the highest level just because they had the physical ability, just because they were 7 feet tall and they could shoot a basketball, but they hated the sport. They hated it. Just someone was going to pay them, and they, okay, I'll do it. But there was no joy in it. There was no, they were just sort of checking the box and like counting the days until they could just like, okay, I'm done with this. And again, you see it in youth sports. Kids just burn out by the time they're 15, 16, right? And again, it's just, you're creating this, if they don't have the joy and the desire to do it, like, as a parent, like, it's really tough. Now, I say that, and on the same token, with especially my oldest, who lacrosse is his main sport, and he wants to play at a very high level, or at least that's his goal. That's fine. I will help support you in your goal, but that's not my goal. It's yours. But you also can't just say it, because if you want to play at a high level, if these are things you want to attain, but I've again, to your point, I've seen what it takes to get there. And not practicing for 2.5 weeks, that's not part of that formula to get you there, right? Like, that's not part of like taking it the easy way out. Like, you talk to a lot of professionals, like, no, like, they lived and breathed it. And it wasn't a chore. It was something they loved to do, and they worked at it tirelessly as they got older. Yeah, but then also balancing that he's 14 years old, right? And like, he's got a long time ahead of him. But really, understanding that it has to be driven by themselves, right? Like if you try and force it on them, like, very rarely have I seen that turn out well. And then again, getting the athletes to the athletes, from an identity standpoint, because I've seen that too, right? Kids who, let's say at a real young age were a good athlete, but as puberty happens and as that playing field gets a little bit, more leveled, they're not, and they can't take it. And they kind of they just lose themselves, and then their whole identity just kind of comes crashing down, and it becomes this, this cascade effect of the rest of, on other things in their life. And like, that's a tough one. That's just, again, that, I don't have an answer for that one, right? Because I think every kid, and I'm fortunate enough, my kids don't have that tie up into like their identity is the sport that they play. My son just loves to play lacrosse and wants to be very, very good. So he has to work at it. But I think if it went away tomorrow, he might be disappointed, but it wouldn't, it wouldn't affect him the way, some people and some kids get affected when it goes. But yeah, the parents forcing them, I honestly, I coaching, and then even sitting on the sidelines, because I don't coach lacrosse, but I sit there, and again, my son he's good, so we're traveling all over for lacrosse, and I see these parents who are just on the sidelines screaming, and at their kids, at the refs, at this, and I cannot comprehend how they think that is a positive, not only I don't want to say role model, but just a positive image for their children to see, but how they think that's helping.
Yeah.
Like, who likes to get yelled at? I've yet to meet someone who enjoys to be yelled at. And again, you see it with coaches, right? Coaches just berating their athletes and things like that. It's like, how do you think that is going to get the best out of that person and out of that athlete? Like, again, that we're talking sports, but that's in life. Like, no one wants to be yelled at in things like that. Like, how can you actually, positively draw things out of people? So, but yeah, the whole parent and youth sport thing is one that I just, it's baffling to me. Baffling to me.
I brought it up because it's something that I'm I'm not experiencing it. I'm viewing it. I'm observing it right now with one of my kids' friends, that the whole identity has been created around this something outside of them.
Yep.
At the root, every sport is outside of you. And it's not going to plan right now, and it is a collective meltdown topped on top of puberty. It's just like, and sometimes, unfortunately, these things happen when the body and the brain are dealing with so many other things, right? Puberty, growing, all of those massive changes. So it's how do we create for our mind and our bodies, knowing that we need to be able to pour into our cups from multiple different facets?
Yep.
That's shifting into those, and so that when one runs dry, the cup isn't completely bare, because, all right, so that one's gone. All right, but I've been filling it with 4 or 5 other ones. So, this is importance of hobbies. And, when you were talking about for the athletes, like, the ones who are there because they just got on this train ride and didn't know how to get off. But the
Yep.
ones who it's genuine joy, and that's when it's not work, it's joy.
Yep. But also, you make me think of which I was fortunate for the 2 years I was at Stanford, that Professor Dweck, Carol Dweck, was a professor there at Stanford, and her, sort of famous book, I believe it's Mindset, but I think I'm wrong. I think it's got some other thing, but in about, open and closed mindsets, right? And how just the language we speak to ourselves, but then also, again, back to our earlier part of this conversation, but then to our children is really what she's talking about in this book, and how that actually, again, helps ingrain or not some of these identities, right? Like, there's one thing with, oh, you're so smart. You're so, like, well, okay, now if that's the language you keep saying, then that becomes tied up into a child's, oh, I'm smart. And then what happens when they get things wrong? Well, now that's when things start to fall apart, right? As opposed to, wow, you work really hard. Well, that's a trait that is, regardless, to the point you made earlier of, like, take the traits that made you successful at that and go now apply them to everywhere. And if you have if your identity is tied up in, oh, I work hard, well, you could take that and go anywhere with that, right? If it's I'm smart, yeah, and now things don't, go your way. Now you start to question yourself. You start to question all these things. You start to question your identity. Whereas if it's work hard, and again, I'm just picking those two examples. If something doesn't work, well, that's okay. I'm just going to work harder. I'm going to work. I'm going to figure out another way because I'm a hard worker. Like it's just those little things. And again, I certainly don't hear enough parents kind of highlighting those traits that they want their children to have rather than the ability, so to speak.
I mean, right now, as you and I are recording this, my daughter is up at state competing in golf right now. I took her 2 years ago and was able to experience it for 2 whole days. And so my husband's doing it this year because only a certain amount of people are allowed on the course. So, or I would be there. But, this morning I was on the phone with her as she was getting ready to tee off. And my advice was just have fun, just enjoy the day. And if you start getting stressed, I always, I like to shift my focus, so you're not really thinking of the exact moment. I'm like, focus on what kind of birds are around you. Like what are they doing? Try to find things that bring you joy so you're not hyper focused in, oh my gosh, I missed that last putt, and you're not like doing this in your mind. And yeah, so my advice to her was just have fun. Like everything, you need to be having fun while you're also working in life.
I am an avid golfer, and golf is a very difficult one to do that because it is you. It is just spotlight is on you, and there's no teammates, there's no one to help, there's no, so golf is a tough one to maintain that positivity. But again, I think a lot of things go into how robust someone is in being able to do that, right? How the skill set that they're armed with to be able to focus on that stuff, but then come back and focus in on their shot and then kind of get out of it. Yeah.
What best advice, because I know that you have seen this, the athlete slump, that when they just cannot get out of their own heads. I'm watching it, my son's volleyball team, they're just, everyone gets in their own head and it's like, come on, break out of it. What's some of the best advice that you've either seen or given for people when they do feel like they are just in this mental rut? They've just in this gully. How can we get back up out of that?
I think there's two things that I think can help with it. One is back to what we talked about earlier, routines, right? Like, are you, what is your routine? And a lot of times when they've had a routine, but they've gotten away from it, or they don't have one at all. And okay, if you don't have one, how are you supposed to sort of get refocused and get that, whatever it is you're searching for, back? So some of that is either getting them back into a routine or developing a routine that they now can go count on. And that's where they focus on the results of what happens in a game when there's other factors at play. Like that's an outcome of the work that they're doing there that they can control, because they can't always control that. So that's certainly the first step. But sometimes it's also just getting a different perspective and just getting away from what it is that is, because that mindset, again, it can be this just absolute negative spiral. I've seen it with athletes. What I like to do with actually a lot of athletes is after their given season in their sport, whether or not they were having going into, kind of a slump, let's call it, or whatever it is let's get away from their sport and let's go do other activities, to other, not, I don't even want to call them hobbies, but we're going to go do other things to just like come back more mentally refreshed. And just can I get your mind away from that by doing other things? So you don't have to even think about that. And then can you come back in with a different perspective, with a different, and maybe along those way, the things that we're doing outside of their normal sport.
Yeah.
I might be under, like infusing things that I know will help when they go back, or maybe I recognize why or what they're struggling with certain things, but I don't want to call more attention to it. Mm-hmm. You can maybe address it in that routine again, if that's the approach, but I can maybe highlights or get them to do it or address it in a different way. So they're not tying it back to their sport and why it is that they're having this, again, decreased performance. But then when they come back to it, they've either been working on it or it's been something that's kind of, closely related to it, but they're able to now come back with fresh eyes in a fresh perspective. I with one team in particular, I did after the season, and they was just a grind. Like mentally, they were just beat. They were just beat. And we didn't touch a basketball for a month and a half. And if they wanted to go do it on their own, they could. But as a team, we did not. And we just played every week. We focused on a different sport. So they had to work on, again, different movement patterns, but like just mentally sort of focus on something else again over the course of 6 weeks. And it was awesome. And they came back and they couldn't wait to get back on a basketball court and put a ball in their hands. And then to see that, 6 weeks, which I had the luxury of having that time. Not everyone does, but it did make a big difference. So I think routine, and then somehow how can you create like a mental diversion to allow them to come back to it a little bit fresher.
Yeah. I always like to employ the small wins, small movements when you're like down so low. All right. So what are just some very, very small wins that you can line up for yourself? And then the small movements, me, myself, when I'm feeling really, really depleted, I think it's important for people to really kind of go within and nail down the 1 to maybe 4 things that no matter what mental state I am, no matter where I'm at, when I do X, Y, Z, or A, those charge my internal batteries. No matter where I'm at, if I can just do this for a couple of minutes, I have more energy. And I think a lot of people don't give themselves the time to kind of go inside and look for those patterns when they notice when I'm doing this, I have more energy to face the day tomorrow, or so, and those would be the small moves. So when we can navigate and we can nail down, when I do, XYZ, I notice that I can shift that rut, that mental rut, and I can slowly begin to like peck out and see some light coming back into my life again. So small wins, small moves, so that we don't get overwhelmed. Even, we highlighted earlier just about healthy eating and healthy lifestyle. It's really hard, I think, when you go to somebody who's wanting to make a change, or like, especially like with eating, if you tell them you could never have that again, always going to fail, always going to fail. But we can always make, what I say, like even my kids and everyone, I can make one small decision at a time. And so whenever there's something in my dietary life that I'm needing to remove that I know is not healthy for me, I break it down every time that I get mealtime. At that particular meal, I'm not going to have that at this meal. And I don't think anything beyond that, just at this. And those are like the small wins, right? Sweet. At lunch today, I didn't have this. And then what you notice is when you look back a month later, you're like, I didn't have that one food that's, killing my gut for a whole month. And now I'm actually don't even crave it anymore. So like those are then how you can like shift the mind and begin to have major changes.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I would love, what are some of your best pieces of advice that you could give to anybody who is looking, even just like having a change in career? Because I know that you're no longer with Nike anymore.
Mhm.
What are your pieces of advice for you in order to have that shift and to make that leap in life?
Yeah, it was probably long overdue. And I've always been one to explore different areas and be involved in a lot of different things, because I think it just energizes me when I have different things going on and I can play over here and use a skill set, and over here and use maybe a slightly different skill set, and or maybe even the same skill set but used in two very different areas. So I have to change how I actually use that skill set. but this time was just more about betting on myself. And I think, again, if there's any advice, I think people need to do that a little bit more, is bet on themselves. And I think I reached a point where I was so frustrated with what kind of was happening in that role and where it was going and things. Again, like I said, I should have done it earlier, but I just take a step back and like, I want to bet on myself and see where I can take some of this work that I'm doing. Again, I consult, as we've talked about, with individual athletes, with teams, in federations, and again, in a bunch of different capacities, right? From super, super involved to just really helping solve a very specific problem. But then also companies and consulting for different organizations and companies. And again, sort of, where I can add value. And I've been doing that for a while. In addition to other things, but I took a step back and I just said, I'm going to really try and see where I can grow that and bet on myself to grow my business in where it can take me. So that was the shift in my mind that I kind of recognized where I was in my mindset at that point, which was not in a good place, because I was not. It was the first time ever in my life I had the mindset of like, oh, this is a job. Again, speaking about the role at Nike, and I've never thought like that in my life, and I think that forced me to look inside and be like, well, then what do I want? Like, what do I want to create, and how do I want to go about this? And right now, it is trying to bet on myself and see where I can push my business.
I love that. The greatest commodity that all of us have in our lives is time.
Yep.
Because in this 3D world, we exist all in a linear time frame. And so when you make the shift to understand your worthiness, and if I only have X amount of hours in a day, X amount of days in a week, who do I get to bless my time with?
Yep.
Who am I? And when you can really shift it that way, then it is, betting on yourself and wanting to follow your passions becomes very easy thing to do, because this is my time and how am I going to spend it? So
Yep.
I agree. I love that. I love that. You just surrendered it into yourself. You bet on yourself. So we've been talking sports the whole time. If you're going to
Exactly.
be a betting man, bet on yourself every time.
Yep. For sure.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. I know you're extremely busy, man. But thanks for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.